This is the Juiced Bikes RipRacer. Is it a fat tire e-bike? Is it a BMX? Let's take a ride and find out. Hey everyone, I'm John with Electric Bike Report. I'm really stoked to talk with you about the Juiced RipRacer here, but please take a second to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of our e-bike reviews or our upcoming e-bike giveaways. Back to the star of the show though, seriously, what is this thing? That was our first question. It blends the size and the look of a BMX with the power and the huge off-road tires of a fat tire e-bike. This is definitely not something we see every day, but I'll say that it was a super fun bike to test out. The biggest draw from our point of view was just simply the speed and power of this bike. It has a 52 volt, 750 watt rear hub motor, and that voltage is really the big key here. That allows it to draw power from the battery at blazing speeds, so basically it can use more energy faster. In the real world, that means that it has great acceleration, it's capable of class 3 speeds up to 28 miles per hour with pedal assist, and it's also seriously impressive when it comes to climbing hills, but we can talk more about that part a little bit later on. Another thing that jumped out at me was sort of a side effect of the size of this bike. It has the benefit of really great maneuverability with such a small frame size and its 20-inch by 4-inch CST tires, but it also ends up being a bit more portable than a full-size bike. It weighs about 66 pounds with the battery, but that can be removed to drop the weight down to 54.5 pounds. And I think Juiced nailed the saddle. It was comfortable, but it also has a carry handle to help with moving the bike around. And then if you drop the seat post and loosen the stem to fold the handlebars over, this bike can fit in a lot of places that a full-size bike would not. But third, I think this bike is just a bit of a head turner. It's got a really unique look and style that helps it stand out. And while it only has a single frame size, it comes in 4 pretty unique color options. I mean, black isn't anything unusual, but there's Baja Blue, Mystic Green, and then the super bright Hi-Viz Yellow that we have here. When it comes to the rest of the specs and components here, that battery I mentioned is pretty massive. It has 15.6 amp hours or 811 watt hours of capacity, and it is UL 2271 certified. It has a convenient carry handle, and it's actually compatible with all 52 volt Juiced bikes. On top of that, it has a compartment for an Apple AirTag to give you a little extra peace of mind in terms of security. There's just a single speed drivetrain on this bike, which usually has some limitations, but I actually found this setup to be surprisingly functional, even when I was out in the dirt climbing some pretty steep hills. The big 52-tooth chainring here can be a little tough to get moving, but there is also a half twist throttle to help you get up to speed, and of course that's limited to 20 miles per hour. The bike comes with a set of Logan E500 hydraulic disc brakes with 2 piston calipers and 180 millimeter rotors. It also has a super bright 1050 lumen headlight and an uncommonly wide tail light for really good visibility at night. That tail light can either function as a brake light or it can be set to always be on. And there are also a surprising number of optional accessories too. You can get a cargo rack, baskets, fenders, and all sorts of things to make the bike a little more functional. The cockpit is very straightforward. There are, of course, the BMX style riser bars. The throttle is on the right bar and the bike's display is on the left. That includes the control panel buttons. There are 5 pedal assist settings here: Eco mode, PAS 1, 2, and 3, and then sport mode, but it can also be unlocked to race mode to get unrestricted speeds for off-road riding. The RipRacer has a simple setup overall, which makes it easy to use, but this is honestly a pretty impressive package of features for the price point. The bike is currently priced between about $1,000 and $1,500, which I think is pretty great value for what you get here. But in any case, let's move on and talk about the bike's test performance. So we've had pretty impressive performance from Logan hydraulic brake systems in the past, and to make sure that the E500 system on the RipRacer was up to snuff, we pedaled the bike up to 20 miles per hour and measured the distance it took to stop once we hit the brakes. Again, this setup uses 2 piston calipers and 180 millimeter rotors. So after 3 tests, our data showed an average stopping distance of just 20 feet and 7 inches, which is an excellent result. It's about a foot beyond our average for fat tire, utility, and moped bikes, which I combined since the RipRacer has a lot of overlap with those other styles in terms of weight and brake specs. I was really happy with this result. We've seen bigger and heavier bikes stretch out their average stopping distances in the 22 or 23 foot range, so I think it's pretty easy to say that these brakes are effective and also appropriate for the specs of the bike. When it comes to how the RipRacer felt when braking, overall it was pretty stable for me just because of the width of the tires. It did fishtail a little, and the back wheel wanted to kick out a bit if I wasn't going perfectly straight, but I was able to get the hang of that pretty quickly with a little practice, so definitely no big deal there. I took a GoPro with me during my speed test so I could show you how fast the RipRacer can go in each of its pedal assist settings, as well as how quickly it could get up to 20 miles per hour with its throttle. Let's see how that panned out. All right, I'm here on the Juiced RipRacer to do a speed test. Pedaling kind of right around 10 miles an hour with no motor assistance, which is not super easy with that huge chain ring, but we are making it happen. Let's bump up to eco mode, and that just really takes the edge off of that resistance. So not a huge amount of power, fairly subtle, but it's definitely making a difference here. And you know, if you want to try to get a little bit more range out of the bike, very easy to ride in this setting, but we are kind of averaging right around 14 miles an hour here. So let's bump up to PAS 1. And this is where like the motor really starts giving you a nice boost. Very easy to pedal here in this setting. And we're getting up to speed. We are right around 17 and a half, let's say 17. Well, there we go, 17 and a half miles per hour in PAS 1. Bump it up to PAS 2. And I mean, now we are just cruising. Very nice, fun, casual pace. Surprising how stable this bike feels, you know, it's with its small size. But here we are going right around 21 miles per hour in PAS 2. Let's bump up to PAS 3. And we are really cooking here. So having to keep a relatively rapid pace to keep from ghost pedaling, and it's still feeling a little ghost pedally. We're getting up to about 23 and a half here. Let's bump up to sport mode and really let her rip. Putting in a little bit of leg work, pretty rapid pace, but like I'm just basically moving my feet. Not a lot of pressure there, but it looks like we are going to top out kind of right here around 25 miles an hour. All right, I'm here on the Juiced RipRacer, little BMX style fat tire bike. We're gonna see how fast the throttle can go from 0 to 20. So let's start now. Picking up nice and quick, cruising. And 20. So I want to mention that I had burned through about half of the battery charge when I did this test, so the speeds that I measured ended up a little slower than what the bike is actually capable of when it's fully charged. I measured about 10.5 miles per hour with no motor assistance, which actually took a little bit of effort. Eco mode made that a lot easier though, but it was still pretty conservative. I measured about 14 miles per hour there. In PAS 1, 2, and 3, I measured about 17.5, then 21, and then about 23.5 miles per hour. And in sport mode, which is the highest standard setting, I measured right around 25 miles per hour. With a full charge, most of those settings were about half a mile per hour faster, but in sport mode, I was able to hit about 26.5 or 27 miles per hour. I never quite made it up to that cap of 28 miles per hour, but I'm actually totally okay with that. The bike felt great as it was. I didn't show the bike in the unrestricted race mode, but I did try it out, and at least for me, there wasn't much difference in top speed between that and sport mode. Weight is a factor with speed though, so you might have better results if you're under 200 pounds. We were very happy with the performance here. Make no mistake, this thing can definitely rip and race, and I think the bottom line is just that it is a huge amount of fun to ride. In our range test, we wanted to see if the RipRacer could meet Juiced's advertised range of 55 plus miles with a single charge of that beefy 811 watt-hour battery. We got really close. Our tests in eco mode and sport mode gave us a bracket of between 27 and 50 miles. That 50-mile result in eco mode was actually probably a little low. We measured about 1,700 feet of elevation gain over the 3.5 hours that test took. So riders that can stick to flatter areas will probably be able to meet and even exceed the 50-mile advertisement. In the technical data sheet for the RipRacer, they say with economical or light pedaling and the bike set to class 2 mode, where the motor's capped at 20 miles per hour, it could go up to 80 miles. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, with aggressive riding in race mode, again that unrestricted setting, the range could be as low as 23 miles. We're pretty happy though. First of all, we actually got about 20% more time on the bike in sport mode than we expected, based on the battery and motor specs. And in eco mode, our average speed was about 16 miles per hour. So we were able to cover some real distance on the bike without much of a sacrifice in terms of speed. To see how well the RipRacer could handle the extreme challenge of Hellhole Trail, I'm gonna pass you over to Justin. Let's find out how the bike did with its throttle and also when Justin pedaled up in sport mode.
Okay, so I'm on the RipRacer from Juiced. It's got a 52 volt battery, 750 watt rear hub motor that peaks at around 1300 watts. So kind of have pretty decent expectations for this bike through the steep section, down to about 10, 11 miles per hour. So it's got really beefy front and rear tires. So I was curious to see if that would slow this down too much. So far it feels pretty powerful going up this hill. And I'm going to kind of be quiet through this next section so you can hear the motor and how that engages. So as far as the noise from the motor, it's definitely kind of on the lower end, not the high whiny end. I do need to say we need to adjust this. I think the front, the brakes are rubbing just a little bit here. We have some people up here, but overall really good hill climbing capabilities. And I'm very curious to see the results, but this is definitely one you can crawl up the hill on. Okay, so now we're on the RipRacer pedal test. And it is a single gear with super fat tires, but I can already tell you, I'm just kind of charging up this hill. 17 miles an hour, 16, just about 15 and a half there, and I am not pushing hardly at all on the pedals. So you definitely do get a little more power if you pedal a little bit versus just throttle, at least from these results. We'll listen to the motor through this next section. So got down to just about 14 miles an hour. There still is a little bit of noise from that front brake, needing to be adjusted. Sorry about that. But overall, we'll see what these results, but this was a very easy hill to climb on the RipRacer with that rear hub motor. Just kind of pushing me up the whole way.
So as you could see, the bike had no trouble in either test whatsoever. With its throttle, we measured a time of 1 minute and 19 seconds with a solid average speed of 13.7 miles per hour. We expected it to blast up the hill with a throttle, but we're actually happy that it didn't feel overpowered. This little bike was still able to keep pace with some of the most popular fat tire bikes that we've tested previously, so overall it still did a great job. In sport mode though, we were seriously blown away. Justin pedaled up in 61 seconds and maintained an average speed of 17.8 miles per hour. That is one of the fastest times we've ever seen, and I mean, I wouldn't have expected that just by looking at this bike. The 52-volt motor and the battery here are really what made the big difference. This keeps that power-hungry motor fed and allows it to pump out up to 1,300 watts of peak power and 80 newton meters of torque. Even with that single-speed drivetrain, extreme hills like Hellhole aren't even a concern for this bike, and if you find the throttle a little too slow, you can get moving even faster just by putting in a little bit of legwork. Let's take one more ride on the RipRacer and talk about the defining elements of its ride quality. All right, so in terms of ride quality here on the Juiced RipRacer, pretty fun and interesting little bike. Pretty small frame, pretty small bike, blends sort of a fat tire and a BMX. So kind of an interesting pairing there. And surprisingly, it can fit riders between 5 foot up to 6'3". Most of the adjustment there is in the seat post, but with these BMX riser bars, you can loosen up the stem and then rotate those either toward you or away from you to give you a little bit more adjustment with your reach, but your handlebar height is pretty much set. So I think taller riders are gonna end up with a little bit more of a lean. I'm relatively upright here, and then I think, you know, shorter riders can get sort of whatever position they would like. But good handling on this bike with the 20-inch by 4-inch fat tires. Very nice and maneuverable, kind of turns on a dime. And then of course they do have some off-road tread on them, so you can ride in the dirt, although there is no suspension here, so you are sort of limited there. It's gonna feel a little stiff, but you also can let some air out of the tires to you know, give you a little bit more cushion. So one thing to keep in mind about this bike is that with that BMX influence, the fit here is very different from what you might be used to on a full-size bike. It makes this bike really fun and playful, and it can accommodate comfortably riders from 5 foot to 6'3", but it also definitely feels its size. And another thing to note, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, the RipRacer might have the size of a BMX, but it's probably not something you'll want to take off jumps or attempt to do tricks with. It's just a little heavy for that sort of thing. But when it comes to riding fast and hard, that is what this bike is made for. It has a fairly punchy throttle and a great feel when pedaling, and it also has some pretty unique riding modes. There's throttle assist boost that gives you super fast acceleration when you combine pedaling and the throttle, and there's also a cruise control function that you can set anywhere up to 20 miles per hour, so you don't have to hold the throttle all the time. I wouldn't mind seeing a more sensitive cadence sensor on the bike just to make getting started without the throttle a little bit easier. Right now it takes a quarter turn of the cranks, which takes some effort, and it can feel a little slow, although some of our other testers didn't mind it. But we've seen more and more bikes recently that can engage the motor in about half the time, and I think that would be a good fit here as well. But overall, I was honestly really surprised by how comfortable this bike was to ride. The saddle felt great, there was enough adjustment for me to get pretty good leg extension even when seated, The handlebars felt wide enough for good control, and the ergonomic grips were just kind of a nice little touch that I didn't expect to see, but they actually made a big difference. There is comfort, great handling and maneuverability, a boatload of speed, and a pretty nicely dialed in single-speed drivetrain, not to mention just a really fun feel. I give the RipRacer 2 thumbs up here, even with a couple of little things that I mentioned. We were a little worried about this bike when it first showed up. This was actually our first experience with juiced bikes, and they have a little bit of a reputation of being juiced. Just really fast and powerful. That's definitely the case with the RipRacer, but we were really happy to see that this bike wasn't too fast. Safety is top priority, and it's clear to us that Juiced has that at the top of their list right alongside making products that are really enjoyable to use. This is another bike that I honestly had a tough time finding downsides to. The responsiveness of its cadence sensor was really the primary thing in my mind, and that wasn't even bad. I'd just like to see a more sensitive sensor to benefit riders who can't or don't want to use the throttle. And then it's not a downside at all, but just something to keep in mind. This obviously isn't a full-size bike, and that comes with some differences in fit and feel. There are a ton of little details here that led me to understand why Juiced has become so popular, and that also demonstrate the experience they've gained since they started making bikes in 2010. Again, this bike delivers a really fun experience. It's got all the power it needs to go fast and fly up hills. It's super comfortable, and it's also just really different. This is an awesome bike for cruising with your friends, riding to work or school, or just taking out for a little romp in the dirt. Thanks for hanging with me through this review, and I definitely encourage you to take a closer look at the RipRacer. We'll leave a link to the Juiced Bikes website in the video description to help you out with that, as well as another link to my written review about the bike in case you want to dive in a little bit deeper. Please make sure to use that affiliate link to the RipRacer's webpage if you found this review helpful. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it is a way to say thank you by helping to support us. As always, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'll see you in the next review. That is all for today. Again, I am John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Juiced RipRacer.